All right. Well, it's broadcasting now.
All right. Welcome to Chat Communications Happenings and Trends. So we'll just jump in and get started. The NFL has decided to basically penalize teams of players if a player decides not to stand but to instead kneel for the national anthem. And that decision actually came by the NFL owners without actually any union decisions. I don't know what that was, but so basically this could indicate some sort of workers' rights issues, and we actually are going to go another workers' rights issues as well. So Janet, just kind of, what are your initial thoughts to this? Before I ask that question, I'm going to tell you just right off the bat that I think that this is basically giving in to that narrative, the false narrative that these players are kneeling in order to disrespect America and the anthem and the flag. I think that kind of gives that dialogue and that argument credence when it was actually never about that in the first place. So Janet, why don't you just jump in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, I don't know if it's because of when it corresponded, when the whole protest started, that Trump takes it as a slight, because then you have Mike Pence putting out a tweet saying winning because they got this this decision that they can't do this. And I don't know, it's like it never made forcing people to do the pledge or stand for the Star Spangled Banner is just like it just seems wrong to me. I feel like it's pushing nationalism, and that's where the Trump whole thing is leading us, is to the nationalists.
Well, it's pushing false nationalism, or this kind of phony, fake, artificial nationalism, right? Like, stand for the flag, otherwise it's un-American. It's actually un-American to force people to do so. These protesting is about the most American thing that you could possibly do. I keep saying this, that the country was founded based off of a fucking massive protest, and so they are actually exercising their American rights that they have in order to basically start a conversation about what they see as an injustice occurring. It was about police brutality and the killing of unarmed Black people in America by the police. It wasn't about disrespecting America or disrespecting the flag. And again, that phony nationalism is getting so much credence because they are winning in this battle. Well, they've allowed this to be the dialogue. It's like they want this to be the dialogue. Even the NFL owners, maybe they want this to be part of the dialogue because it may be affecting sales. I don't even think it is actually affecting sales or viewership, them kneeling. I just think it's, maybe the threat of the current administration that they have threatened the NFL as far as like losing their nonprofit status, so that they would have to subsequently pay taxes, which they should be paying taxes because it's it's a huge billion-dollar industry. Some of that money is obviously going to the players, but if you are going to restrict, it's just, this whole thing is messed up. This is phony nationalism when it is nationalism. True Americans protest. It's just how it is. And we may not agree with whatever they're protesting, but they have the fucking right to do it. And this, if they don't want to be a private company, if they don't want to operate as a private company, then they're basically get to operate as a private company while not paying taxes because it's a public service of some sort. So again, they should not have this right to do this, and they should have definitely addressed it and negotiated with the union that they have, because this was a decision that was made without union discussion. So they completely obliterated the rights of these workers, the NFL players in this case, to negotiate. And my recommendation, if it's about the anthem, about protesting or not, or kneeling, they're going to have to get a little bit creative and maybe turn their back against the flag or something. Because if it does specify kneeling specifically, then they have an out, right? Yeah. They can essentially turn their backs and they won't be penalized. But at the same time, it's not kneeling and it's a protest. I just think that we have to really define what it means to be American in this country and what America stands for. Does it stand for this phony nationalism where any little snowflake can get offended because you didn't stand for the national anthem? And what business is it of yours? You obviously don't care about my particular issue, so I don't care about your particular issue. It's just outright madness. This country is falling into a trap, and this doesn't play out in history very nicely. It just doesn't. And we have history, we have these warning signs, and nobody's heeding these warnings. And that's troublesome to me. And I don't want to get everybody all in a tizzy and do all these scare tactics and things like that. But it is frightening to see this happening in a society where it was kind of expected, no, we would never allow these things to happen. But it's been building up over time. And I think part of the problem is restricting worker rights. Because when people feel like they don't have any power, they cling to whatever little bit that they can get to have some sort of group identity. And in this case, it's this faux nationalism.
Yeah, I want to share one little story about my father. Can you mute me? Sorry. My dad goes to hockey games. He goes to actually the Northeastern. He's an alumni, and when this all came about in the fall, and he was going to the hockey game, he was like, I don't know what to do. He's like, I'm a veteran, and I don't want to stand. I want to, I'm going to sit through the national anthem. He goes, but he was torn. He's 80 years old, but even he understood what it was about. I mean, he was a Marine. He was in the Army Corps of Engineers. He's worked for the government, much of his life. He's an engineer, so a lot of his jobs are government-based jobs and stuff like that because he did contracting. But even he, as American as he is, can get this. I don't understand why it is anyone else's business if they take a knee or not. It baffles me that people get so offended by protesters. I never understood that. I mean, obviously, people are protesting things for reasons, and focus on the reasons and not the people, not the people just doing it. You know what I mean? Obviously,
but that's why they get offended, because they don't want to focus on the reasons. They want to be offended by something else because it covers up the real issue that people are actually trying to address, and they don't want to hear it. They don't want to know that there's injustice in America because they're comfortable, and it's making them a little bit uncomfortable when you kneel because they're fucking little pissy babies. And that's what it comes down to. They just don't give a shit. They don't want to know these things. And the best way to have that come into their homes is through something like a sports activity that a lot of Americans watch. I mean, there's a history of protest in sports, and that has helped create change and helped create conversations, if anything. But when you've got these right-wingers that get to flip the dialogue, then it's no longer about the issue, which the NFL has just basically said it was never about the issue. Yep. It was always about disrespecting the flag, which it was fucking never about.
Nope. Not at all. And it's just, I mean, it's crazy on that end too, is there's already some iffiness about the NFL, and how they treat, the players and stuff. I mean, basically working them into injuries and stuff like that, which is, I mean, it's part of the game, and they get paid a lot of money. I get that too.
Well, they hid the injuries too, the brain injuries.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot more in the background to it too. So it just, I mean, it is just ruined. I mean, the sport has been ruined for me. I used to love watching football. I don't even care to watch it now. I don't even care. I can't. So.
Okay, so let's get on to another issue here about workers' rights. So recently, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, has decided that workers can no longer band together to basically challenge violations in federal labor laws. And so this means that they no longer are able to submit or do class action lawsuits. And this has a lot of implications as far as workers are concerned, because a lot of times as an individual, workers fear retaliation. And so they won't individually make a case against their employer due to that fear. But as a group, they are more powerful, and them individually won't be I guess, at the brunt of the employer's wrath, basically. And also, class action lawsuits allow workers to also know if their rights have been violated, if the federal labor laws have been violated, so that they can join these class action lawsuits. Where again, as an individual, you may not know that your employer is violating the law. And so I think that this is atrocious. Again, this is a further step in degrading workers' rights and protections in the United States. And this has been condoned by the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court who typically is very corrupted by the influence of money in politics. So Jana, what do you think?
The whole thing, like, it's once again, like, really weird timing, because you come out, like, a lot of this stuff is coming out about say Amazon and what's happening in their warehouses and stuff like that. So now you had Trump complaining about Bezos, and then now none of those workers are going to be able to band together. And plus, I also view it, I don't know if this is right, but I kind of see it as being a step against unions too, like informing unions and stuff like that, because a lot of times when unions are formed are because workers get together and they have a complaint or something to go against. So it's just like one little step against that too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're taking power away from the workers once again. You're taking power away from the workers, and you're putting it in the hands of the corporations. So we don't matter. People don't matter in this country. It's the corporations, it's their donors, and even to the Supreme Court, that's all that matters. So we're kind of screwed.
Right. And so when in basically making the case for this decision, Neil Gorsuch, which was appointed to the Supreme Court by Donald Trump, made a note and basically said that in 1925, it was decided that workers didn't have this right to do so. Even so, the 1925 law superseded the current law, basically. But if you recall what was going on in the 1920s, late 1920s, and then into the 1930s, what happened? And so we could basically see another Great Depression. And I mean, this is all adding to these restrictions of workers' rights, these busting of unions. And again, we see the funneling of wealth going up to the top 1% of 1% of the country. And this is all adding to that, because now workers don't get to negotiate their pay. They don't get to basically see if their rights have been violated by their employer. They have to do that again as an individual, which is madness, because nobody's going to get penalized here. So frustrating to see that there are solutions to these problems and nobody cares. It's just this, especially, you know, people on the other side of the aisle don't seem to give a shit. They're like, yeah, corporations should be able to like fuck the shit out of you, right? They should be able to take all of your money. Obviously, they do a better job than you. It's like you're working your ass off and getting paid very little. If you're working multiple jobs and you're telling me that the workers aren't working hard enough, are you fucking mad? Like, this is madness. And this is just, again, there's historical precedent in place that has shown what happens when you strip away workers' rights, when you strip away unions, when you strip away, you know, basically the rule of fucking law, because there was another law that the National Labor Relations Act came after this 1925 law that basically did assure that workers had the right to basically come in as a collective and challenge their employer. But again, there's a problem here, and the history has shown that this does not play out very well, guys. And it's kind of like I feel like I'm screaming into the void. And Janet, you may feel the exact same way, because you're like, hey, there's a solution here. Don't do this. There's a solution. Let people band together so that they can have their power back. You know, let's assure that they have wages that keep up with inflation so that they can, you know, we're going to have a capitalist consumer-based society. We need to assure that we have people able to spend. That's not just the 1%. But of course, people are greedy. They don't follow lessons in history, and history, that's why history is doomed to repeat itself. And it's unfortunate that we're living through these times, and that we have the fucking solutions. But the solution here, we fixed them in the past, or we've made them better. And instead of trying to even improve upon the improvements that we had made, we're just kind of let's kind of regress and go back to those simple times when people were just dirt poor, where everybody in the nation was pretty much poor, and you had your Rockefellers rolling about, basically going like, "Here's a fucking nickel, you peasant," because that's the type of society we love.
It's disgusting. It's just gross. But like, I mean, you're talking about the solutions, and I feel like the solutions have been there, and they were just laying there, and everything was stagnant. And we weren't getting to the solutions, but now it seems like we're moving further and further away from any of those solutions. So, it's just wrong.
It is wrong. And so I have a question, because I've been kind of, and I bring this up, I don't know how often I bring this up, probably pretty frequently. So you've got, looking at generations, and you've got, you know, the silent generation. They're the ones that lived through the Great Depression, you know, went to World War II, and all those things. Basically, they got bonds and or purchased bonds because it was the patriotic thing to do, of course, but it did help. And they basically helped build, you know, from this disastrous situation, a better America for their children. And then their children, which is the baby boomers, right? They came about, and you can't really, I guess they protested Vietnam, right? Now, yeah. It was the silent generation that did the civil rights movement. But the baby boomers, they protested Vietnam, and then what? And I'm sure some people kind of kept up, but I feel like they kind of allowed our government to be taken over by the corporations. And so they've left a government that no longer represents anybody except for the corporations. They've allowed money to be the #1 influencer in politics. And then now we're left with cleaning up that mess. And it kind of makes me really angry against that particular group of people. And I hate to basically say it's all of them, but I feel like they fell asleep behind the wheel. They were too comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, because they had what they needed, but they didn't. Who are you to not assure that your children have what they need? You know?
Well, that's what their parents did. Their parents wanted to make sure, because their parents went through the Depression, they wanted to make sure that their children had more. So the early boomers were raised, more comfortable than definitely the silent generation. So I think the 70s and 80s just killed us. I think after the protesting in the 60s, after Vietnam ended, everyone just got complacent. And I think in the 80s, with the bubble, with them coming in with Reaganomics and stuff like that, creating a lot of these people were comfortable, even more comfortable, because they made money in it. You know what I mean? And so now they look back and they're like, they feel like, I'm not saying all, they're not, definitely not all of them. And I know plenty of boomers and even silent generation people that are still living that see the issues and stuff like that. But there's enough of them that they got really comfortable, really complacent, and they really felt like, I don't know if I got a feeling from some of them when I talk to them, it's almost like they want that whole thing in the 60s, all those protesting, like they don't want that taken away from them or something. Like that was a feeling I've gotten from talking to a few of them.
What is that? What do you mean by that? Like, is somebody trying to take that accomplishment away from them?
Well, with us doing all the protesting and stuff now, that we're not doing it right. I mean, I've heard different things like that. Like, the way that we protest isn't the way that they protested, or like, and then I always get this feeling like, do you not want us to protest because you think that was your thing and we're not supposed to like protest anymore? Or are they feeling a slight, like we're protesting them for things that they did, which we are?
To some extent, they're right. We aren't allowed to protest in the manner that they did, because we will get arrested or like severely penalized to some extent. We have to schedule protests because like there are laws now that have prevented group gatherings without the permission of the state or the county or the city that you live. And so what type of protest is that when you have to get government approval?
Yeah.
So they didn't have those same restrictions that we do now. And so it may not look right to them, because they had the freedom to protest whenever, wherever they felt they needed to. And I don't think anybody's trying to take that away from them, but at the same time, can we not admit that somebody just allowed they got too comfortable? Maybe there was some reactionary. Maybe it was a reaction to the civil rights movement that you saw Reagan come in and say, it's, the poor needs to be demonized. Well, he didn't verbally say this, but, basically his stance was the poor is demonized. We're all individuals. We need to put more money and more credit and more debt on the individual. And it is no job of this country or the state or the city or county to help take care of the masses, when I would argue that actually it is, because we live in a society and that's what societies are supposed to do. So I don't understand the appeal of Reagan, to be perfectly honest. I just don't. And that appealed to too many of the baby boomers. And I want to know why. Like, their parents gave them everything. to some extent, right? Sure, there are boomers that are desolate and or poor or things like that, but there was a large swath of them that got everything they could ever ask for. Their college was free. Before, wasn't it free college before Reagan?
It was it depended on the college. I mean, obviously the private colleges weren't, but state schools were a hell of a lot cheaper. If at all that you had to pay anything. I know like my mom got into the state school for teaching, and she went for free, and it wasn't a scholarship she went for free on. She went for free because she had good grades, and I mean, she did good grades, and they were like, yeah, you can come into the state school for free. But I mean, even then, like after Reagan got in, like that's when the colleges really started. I mean, it kind of started a little bit towards the end of the 70s, but really in the 80s is where you see, I mean, I can tell you, because I started college in the 80s, that in 1 year, like there was a big, huge jump in my tuition. You know what I mean? Like the end of the 80s. So I think you're right in the fact that, it was basically Reagan coming in, and, more and more things getting privatized, and then the state schools having to try to keep up with the private schools and them thinking that they need all this money. But I don't know. I mean, the government pulls more and more away from programs like that, like things that are going to help their people. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. They're going to have no people. We're not going to be able, we're not going to be able to afford the things the corporations are putting out. We're not going to be able to, I mean, they're killing us in certain ways with some of this stuff. So, I mean, we're not going to be there. We're not going to be there. And what are they going to do then? You go, Amanda. Are you talking? No. I think you muted me. I think you're
yeah. I was going to look at our chat to see if anybody had anything to say.
Are you talking? No.
Do you hear me?
Oh, you have to, because if you put on the chat, you can hear me talk. Like if anyone's talking, you're going to hear it. So that's what happened early on.
Okay, so let's see. Somebody said that Reagan actually gets blamed too much, Jake Smith. The State Department and CIA tried to get him to do regime change in Syria, but he resisted. He never got the U.S. into a conflict he did not know how to get out of. Okay, so that kind of seems like it's on a little bit of a tangent. We were talking about Reagan regarding the economic policies that were implemented, and how it seems like a lot of the things during that time were also privatized. There was a move towards privatization because I was not alive or was not at least cognizant enough to understand or really be aware of what happened.
Well, I mean, I just want to say, like, Reagan does get blamed a lot on not the foreign stuff, but the economic stuff, because that's basically when it all started. I mean, some of the neoliberalism started, yes, Jimmy Carter started some of it. I mean, it came in about 1976 down in Chile, and that's kind of the model that they went off of. And so Jimmy Carter with the transportation, he started some privatization with that. So I mean, it does go back. I mean, it goes further than Reagan, but Reagan took the privatization stuff a hell of a lot further, and then it just went into the Clinton age. So I mean, there you have it. And that, if you look over, I put out that UN report thing all the time, and if you look that over, it is from the last 40 years that's exactly when neoliberalism started. That's what has happened to our country. I'm not saying some of it wasn't there before, but you know, it's gotten worse over the last 40 years.
Right. So it seems like there was some appeal towards a certain sector of the population to assure that Reaganomics basically was the main doctrine, which if you, okay, so basically so you had Reaganomics, this economic theory of trickle-down economy, right? Where if all the corporations did better, if all the people at the top did better, they would somehow trickle that down to the masses, and then everybody would be doing better. No reasonable economist, no literal academic economist believes that to be the case. No one that isn't like bought and sold by some right-wing think tank economist believes that. And they will attest that trickle-down economics is not a thing. It does not work. And you saw that now in the Trump tax cuts, right? To where, again, corporations basically get all of the money, all of the tax breaks, I guess, as a little bit of a concession. The middle class and middle class got a tax break, but that's set to expire, that tax break, whereas the corporation ones were permanent. And even if you were poor or are poor, you saw your taxes increase because they got rid of some assistance programs. So, and that being said, okay, well, it's okay because these corporations, they will make jobs for us, and they will, you know, give us more money, you know, share some of that love that they're receiving. No, they're doing stock buybacks. This was seen in the Harley-Davidson case, where they're laying off employees currently, moving their warehouse or their what is it called? Basically, wherever they're moving that to India because it's cheaper labor, and firing the employees that they have here while simultaneously doing stock buybacks. And stock buybacks artificially increases the price of their stocks. And who owns the majority of their stocks? Well, people that own Harley-Davidson, the CEOs and things like that. And so when they do stock buybacks, they basically get additional bonuses because the decision is like, wow, look how good your company is doing. Look how high your stock prices are. You get an additional $40,000 bonus this year. So it only continues to benefit the CEOs, the people that own these massive corporations, and the workers are getting laid off by the hundreds. So Reaganomics has been proven to not work time and again, and stupid people, and yeah, you're stupid if you believe Reaganomics works. I'm just going to call you like you are. You're a dumbass if you actually believe that to be the case, because when has it worked? I'll wait.
There's Celeste was saying you got to kind of go back to Nixon, the Powell memo, and the implementation of the crap in that memo, giving us a slow-moving. Oh damn it! Now the thing went down. Slow-moving corp coup. As planned, if they did it all at once, the people would have revolted, I think is what she's writing. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, some of this stuff was already coming in place. I mean, we know like the drug stuff and all that was coming in place before. But I don't know. I mean, I have to keep going back to Reagan because the 80s were the thing that pushed up so many corporations and stuff like that. And then we went into the 90s and we had, we were in this big bubble. And then that's why, like, when the internet came out and all these startups happened and everyone was getting money and everyone was happy. And then it just all went dead. And that's what happens when you rely on like trickle down. I mean, it doesn't work. It's not working. People are, what is it? 47% make 30,000 or less. Was that the number?
It's a pretty high percentage. I thought it was, if it's not 47%, it's 50%.
Yeah. So
it's nearly half the country. Yeah.
And that, 30,000, I mean, I was making that back in the 90s when I was in my 20s. I mean, like, and I was just barely getting by then, so I can't even imagine living on that.
Yeah, my first job out of college, I made about $20,000 a year. And it was like a research position at a private school, private university.
I made 20,000 when I went to school for a year and a half. I went to college, then I took a year off, and I made 22,000 that year just doing data entry. And you're telling me 10 years later you made the same amount?
Yeah, in 2008. So I mean, that's
almost 20 years.
Yeah, that's nearly 20 years later, and that was with a 4-year degree. So yeah, I mean, that was of course during the crash, and I couldn't really find a job, and that's really all I just took it. I was like, yeah, I'll take it. It has benefits, and then I also can get something. And so yeah, that's where I was. And then I went to graduate school because after that there was just nothing else I could do or find. Plus I wanted to go to graduate school anyways, but it was just the right time for that. But of course I had to get more debt to do that, and I already had a lot of debt from college, from undergraduate.
So
it's just, you're just pushing the burden onto the worker and onto the individual, and something's got to give. It's going to break, whether it's the student loan, the trillion something dollars, multi-trillion something dollar student loan problem that we are encountering, or something else. We're going to experience another crash, and it's really just a matter of time. And it's really because people don't seem to learn their lesson or don't know enough or something. I'm not really even sure why, because everybody I talk to seems to be pretty well informed that trickle down doesn't work. That's probably why the Trump tax breaks had like a 20-something% favorability rating or something like that. And the majority of the country opposed those tax cuts. And for good reason, because they have been shown to not benefit anybody except for the top, the top 1% of the country. But yeah. All right. Is there anything else that we want to go over today? Any other chat interesting comments?
Still just on the Reagan stuff.
Okay. So I think we're going to call it for today. And so thank you guys for watching. We'll try to kind of keep up more with your comments in the future. Let us know if you liked the way that we did this type of format, or if you just like this type of, or if you just like the traditional format that we've done in the past, where we just release a segment at a time and we don't really do anything live. So just let us know.
This is easier for me, guys.
Okay, so we have a vote over here. She prefers to do it live. So we'll wait to see if we get any feedback and kind of let you know probably tomorrow, right? Because we probably have to do something for tomorrow. Whether we're going to do this type of format again.
All right.
All right.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay.